Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Dome Runners TV. I'm your host Crimson Oracle, and today I'm going to have another hobby video for you. I'm working on a new series, and this is the first episode. On these episodes, we are going to be looking at inexpensive ways to make terrain, largely from stuff that you may have lying around the house. I am largely inspired by one of my all-time favorite hobby books, War Games Terrain, a Games Workshop publication from 1996. In the past nearly 30 years, it has inspired me to try many outside the box things that I would not have necessarily done otherwise. And I just couldn't sing its praises high enough. I'm just going to be showing you a small sampling of different techniques that I use in order to make terrain from recycled stuff that would otherwise be going out my house into the waste stream. So today we're going to show a really simple starting point, which is building gantry planks or, walkways for placing between your buildings and stuff. These are bits that you won't find in massive supply when you're buying Games Workshop terrain, the plastic stuff. So I find that if that's the route you go, it's very helpful to make a bunch that you can then use and abuse, honestly. Because Necromunda is a game that relies, I think, on a lot of interconnectedness between high points in order to make using those high points as strategically valuable as possible. Otherwise, they're just used for camping, for high ground, for sniping, for that kind of stuff. And it's a little bit like that. That's fun, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when you add that sort of interconnectedness, then you have people running around on second and third floors who are looking to do melee and other things. And it's a lot of fun when your sniper has to worry about someone sprinting across the board and slamming a chain axe into their face. So I'm really excited to embark on this project. I'm going to build a full 3x3 board using just stuff that I'm otherwise going to be throwing out. And I am going to do it as kind of a demonstration of the fact that you can actually get by doing this, this hobby with fully detailed, fully painted terrain for a pretty reasonable overhead. I think, I'll try to estimate the cost of all the various craft items, but this board is going to cost well under $100, and that will include the board itself. So I'm very excited to get all the different components done and show you guys what a salvaged board looks like. And then my hope is that board will wind up being used, for the campaign that I'm going to be running as one of the, the options for people to choose from. It's just going to be another creative terrain that I build. So look forward to showing it off, and check back here next week for the next installation, where I will be showing how to make a Pringles can tower that does not look like a Pringles can at the end. So with that, I will move on to showing you the techniques. For this particular build, I am using some MDF planks that were used as dividers in the drawers that I recently purchased. But you could easily get away with using popsicle sticks or tongue depressors, or even those free paint stirrers that you can get at the hardware store, and just cut them down to this size, because you can really do everything with just that. And then I use corrugated paper as a major way to add extra texture to this build. And then, of course, plasticard. I actually use yard sale signs for my plasticard, which is a totally affordable way to get large amounts of sheets of styrene. And of course, I use a little bit of granny grating, which is needlepoint mesh, and I use some bits of sprue. And together, that gives us a ton of texture inputs on our build. So let's get cracking. So right off the bat, when I am working with this plasticard, I'm going to be slicing it in non-straight ways, and I'm going to be breaking it and trimming corners. This is what I do in order to prevent, to provide the kind of appearance of this being salvaged scraps of metal that have been soldered or bolted together over a period of years that, almost, ship of Theseus kind of thing, where is this even the original plank that was here, or have you replaced every part of it? And of course, I do the plastic card in big chunks, and then I'll come through with the corrugated paper. And I'm using super glue for all of this because I'm combining paper, wood, and plastic. And then you'll see me spraying accelerant every once in a while because one issue that you run into with, when you're kind of bending the plastic card and you want it to have that kind of warped look is that you will have it kind of bend away from the glue, and then the glue will harden without it fully being secured down. So the accelerant causes it to cure almost instantly. And of course, I detail both sides. You don't necessarily have to. I am personally just kind of, since I take a lot of photos and do a lot of that kind of stuff, I'm always trying to provide some texture and detail on the other sides. This process, of course, includes the lovely nail beads that they're like circular nail beads that are really fantastic stand-in for rivets. I like to apply them by putting super glue down on the spot where I'm applying, and then using the tip of a X-Acto knife to stab into the pieces and then drag them in. But it's definitely time consuming. In fact, even though I've been showing this video at an accelerated pace, the rest of the time spent on these rivets is I'm going to accelerate it a little bit further. So now I'm going to show you how I make my texture paint that I use for just about everything. I start with a little bit of fine gravel, I add some coarse sand, and I add some fine sand. All of these I get at the craft store, mostly because I am not trying to buy the massive quantities that you get at the hardware store. And I am going to use medium in this situation, and that's only because I was out of white glue. But if you don't know this, acrylic medium and white glue are basically the exact same thing, just with more water in the medium. And so I will usually add water to this step anyway to kind of thin the glue down a little bit. So this is basically the exact same thing as using the white glue. And then as you can see, it started with a very small amount of the fine gravel. And then I add a bunch of coarse sand and a bunch of fine sand. Probably, I would say a quarter cup of each compared to 2 tablespoons of the gravel. And then this is the kicker. This is the thing that really kicks it up a notch, is we're going to add static grass. Now, static grass, I personally don't use very often on builds because I find that you really need to incorporate one of those static generators to your workflow in order to use it properly. And I just don't want to deal with that. So, but what I discovered is that when you add static grass or flock or what have you to your texture mix, it actually really helps create a more organic, less sand kind of appearance, which is really fantastic for getting kind of a dirt kind of feel, or even, just doing ash waste kind of stuff. It just gives it a little bit more body, and I find that it makes your texture paint really good. And I think that that's the key to what the Vallejo thick mud paints are doing. I think they have a lot of flock in their mix, which I think is really cool. And I, have kind of started to do this all kind of my own way as a result. So this is my magic goop that I use for just about everything. It seals because it's it's acrylic. It covers. You can add inks to it to color it. You can, add whatever you need in order to get the right consistency. You could add, bits of chopped up sprue if you wanted it for more of a rubble kind of appearance. You can add thicker things, thinner things. It is a very flexible base to do, your modeling projects with. So this stuff is gold, and you're going to see me use it throughout the rest of these videos. I recommend mixing yourself up a pot. It is way cheaper to do it yourself in the long run than it is to purchase the things of the Vallejo thick mud, but you can use Vallejo thick mud as a stand-in. Now we are going to get on to, I wanted to apply the granny grading. So now we start to apply the texture paint. I tend to go over it pretty thick. Now with the paper, part of the strategy of using the corrugated paper here instead of using corrugated plastic is that the corrugated paper bends better and contours to the surface better. And then when you come in with the goop and it's got that acrylic medium in it, then it will dump that into, it'll absorb that into the pores of the paper, and it will harden, and you will get a nice firm end product, which I find is very nice and simultaneously much cheaper than corrugated plastic. Now, I like to paint these models, using an airbrush just for the base coat, because I'm less dependent on the weather. But this is the kind of thing that you can 100% do with just 2 spray cans, one black and one gray. As you can see, or one black and one white. As you can see, I'm coming over a black undercoat with a white coat on top. And that gives you some depth for when you're going to apply paints over it later. If you apply a thin coat of paint, then this will show through a little bit. It's not as big of a deal when you're using kind of craft paints the way I'm using in this video, but it works. Now I will come through and paint these with a brown acrylic craft paint that I get at the craft store. And then I'm also going to come through with an orange. The brown is Craft Smart Espresso, and the orange is Folk Art Pueblo. But, you don't have to use the specific brands or colors. All the craft paints are kind of similar to some extent or another. Of course, I like to be really sloppy with this. There's already a lot of texture there, so if you do it in kind of a dry brushing motion, you're going to catch more of the grit that you have and less of the sort of flat areas, which would probably, be less rusty. And of course, I also come through with some Abyssal Black to add some black markings and weathering, and then I'm going to come through with a little bit of Iron Breaker from GW, but you could really use any metal paint. This is just the one I had on hand, and I am going to, kind of glop that on roughly on some edges in the areas where even the rust would have potentially been knocked off, and you see some raw metal underneath. And that, in the end, is going to give us more or less finished product. I recommend hitting it with a bit of a black wash to fill things out. But in the end, this is what you get. And here it is shown with some of our upcoming video subjects. First up, of course, you're going to see the Pringles Tower and then Coke Can Train. Thank you so much for watching the show. Of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. and share this with your friends. And of course, I couldn't do this without the lovely support of my patrons. You guys are, fantastic, and I appreciate you very much. And I am hoping that anybody who's interested in this content also checks out my podcast, The Dome Runners, which is on its 55th episode, I think. So I have been at this for a long time. And in the end, I just appreciate everyone who supports me and checks things out. So, of course, if you're interested in helping keep the show on the air, support me on Patreon, and then your name will be at the ends of these videos. So, with that, I am going to sign off for the night. Everybody, stay safe and don't forget to change your paint water.